Picture this. A massive cargo ship docks at a port. It's carrying phones, medicine, food, fuel, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. No suitcase of cash changes hands. No gold bars. No instant payment. The ship unloads anyway, because global trade doesn't actually run on money. It runs on trust. And if that trust breaks, money doesn't save you. That sounds abstract until it isn't. Right now, global trade is under more strain than it's been in decades. Wars, sanctions, shipping attacks, payment systems getting frozen, countries questioning who they can rely on. This matters because almost everything around you crossed a border. Your phone, your clothes, your food. Your job probably depends on it too. So let's strip this system down. No jargon, no charts, just how it really works. Because the uncomfortable truth is this. Global trade only functions because millions of people believe promises will be kept later. And lately, those promises feel thinner. Here's the part most people miss. When two countries trade, money is almost never exchanged upfront. A factory in Vietnam ships goods to a company in Germany. The goods arrive today. The payment might come in 30, 60, even 120 days. Why would anyone agree to that? Because for decades, the assumption has been simple. Germany will pay. The banks will clear it. The courts will enforce it. The currency will still be valid. That assumption is the foundation. Not dollars, not euros, not trade agreements. Trust. Zoom out further. Most global trade isn't settled shipment by shipment. It's netted out over time. Countries don't wire money back and forth every time a container moves. They keep score. If country A buys more than it sells, it runs a trade deficit. If it sells more than it buys, it runs a surplus. Those imbalances don't get settled with trucks of cash. They get settled with promises, debt, assets, future access. In plain language, global trade is a giant IOU system. And it only works if everyone believes those IOUs mean something. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The most important country in global trade isn't the biggest exporter. It's the one whose promises everyone trusts the most. That's why the US dollar dominates global trade. Not because it's perfect, not because America is always responsible, but because for decades, the world believed three things. The US will pay its debts, US courts will enforce contracts, and the dollar will still work tomorrow. That belief allowed the US to import more than it exports year after year, to run massive deficits, to borrow cheaply. That's not a privilege of power, it's a privilege of trust. But trust is fragile. Let's talk about how fragile. In global trade, banks sit in the middle of everything. They don't just move money, they vouch for it. A letter of credit from a bank says, if this buyer doesn't pay, we will. That piece of paper is often worth more than the cash itself, which means when banks stop trusting each other, trade freezes, even if money technically exists. This has happened before. During the 2008 financial crisis, ships were ready, factories were open, demand still existed, but banks didn't trust other banks. Letters of credit dried up. Trade collapsed faster than production did. Global trade fell by over 10% in a single year. Not because people stopped needing things, but because trust evaporated. That's the hidden mechanism. Money is useless if no one believes the promise attached to it. Now here's the irony. The more efficient global trade becomes, the more trust it requires. Just-in-time supply chains, lean inventories, cross-border specialization. All of that saves money and removes buffers. There's no warehouse full of spare parts anymore. There's a ship scheduled to arrive Tuesday. If that ship doesn't arrive, nothing works. Efficiency replaced resilience. Trust replaced slack. And when trust breaks, the system doesn't bend. It snaps. This is where hype meets reality. We talk about global trade like it's governed by rules and treaties. WTO, free trade agreements, tariff schedules. Those matter, but they're not what keeps the system alive day to day. What keeps it alive is the belief that contracts will be honored even when it's inconvenient, even when politics change, even when it hurts. When that belief weakens, countries start protecting themselves. They hoard resources. They reshore production. They build parallel systems. Not because it's cheaper, because it feels safer. That's what you're seeing now. Sanctions weaponized payment systems. Countries exploring alternatives to the dollar. Trade blocs forming around political loyalty instead of efficiency. This isn't ideology, it's risk management. Because once trust becomes conditional, everything costs more. More inventory, more redundancy, more insurance, more friction. Global trade doesn't disappear. It just becomes slower, smaller, and more expensive. And that cost shows up quietly. Higher prices, fewer choices, less growth, not overnight, gradually. Here's the part no one likes to say out loud. Trust in global trade isn't moral, it's transactional. Countries trust each other as long as breaking trust costs more than keeping it. When that balance shifts, trust isn't debated, it's abandoned. That's why money alone can't hold the system together. You can print currency, you can raise rates, you can inject liquidity. You cannot force belief. Once traders start asking, will this payment clear? Once insurers start asking, is this shipment safe? Once banks start asking, who's exposed to whom? The system slows, and global trade slowing isn't dramatic. It's quiet. Empty shelves show up months later. Factories close far from the original problem. Jobs disappear where no one connects the dots, all because trust broke somewhere upstream. So zoom out. Global trade isn't a machine. It's a network of promises layered on top of each other. Money is just the accounting tool. Trust is the operating system. And right now, that operating system is being stress-tested. The uncomfortable question isn't whether global trade will survive. It's whether we're willing to pay the cost required to rebuild trust, or whether we're slowly choosing a world where every country trades like it, expects to be cheated, because once trust becomes optional, global trade stops being global, and we don't yet know what replaces it.